10 famous singers, 10 voices that changed radio, packed arenas, and got lodged inside you permanently.
Let's roll another joint and let's hit.
But almost every single one of them was carrying something enormous. Not on stage, not in interviews, in private. Behind the songs you still know word for word, the pain was there the whole time. You just couldn't see it. Let's talk about what they never showed us. Number 10, Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots. You know the voice, Plush, Vaseline, Interstate Love Song. By 1994, Stone Temple Pilots were one of the biggest bands on the planet, and Scott Weiland was the center of all of it. Magnetic, unpredictable. With a range that could go anywhere, and a stage presence that swallowed the room. He was the kind of frontman that makes you forget everyone else on stage. But underneath all of it was something his doctors, his bandmates, and eventually his family couldn't fix. Scott had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And the addiction, heroin, cocaine, whatever was around, it wasn't just excess. In large part, it was a man self-medicating a condition he didn't fully understand, inside an industry that didn't slow down enough to notice. His ex-wife wrote publicly about him after his death. About how their kids had effectively lost their father years before he actually died. Not from cruelty, not from indifference, because the disease had taken so much of him that what remained wasn't enough to hold everything together. December 3rd, 2015, tour bus, Bloomington, Minnesota. An accidental overdose of mixed drugs and alcohol. Scott Weiland was 47. Stone Temple Pilots had let him go 2 years earlier. He was on a solo tour, playing smaller rooms, and here's what stays with me. The bipolar disorder, the actual underlying condition, almost never made the headlines. The coverage was always about the drugs, the arrests, the public behavior. The illness underneath all of that, mostly invisible, mostly unreported. That's a specific kind of cruelty. When the thing that's actually destroying you keeps getting blamed on everything else. When people confuse the symptom with the character, whether you loved him until the end or lost patience somewhere along the way, you probably know what it's like to watch someone get reduced to their worst moments in the public eye, while the real story stays hidden. Number 9, Dolores O'Riordan, The Cranberries. You know Zombie, you know Linger, you know Dreams, that voice, that specific way of bending a note, hovering over it somewhere between Irish folk and 90s alternative, that no one else could replicate. Dolores O'Riordan built a sound that belonged entirely to her, and she built it on top of a wound that went all the way back to childhood. She was 8 years old when the abuse started, a man in her community. She carried that for decades, through the band's rise, through the arenas, through Zombie becoming a global anthem about violence and loss. She was already living a version of that violence that nobody in the audience could see. She was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She struggled with depression, with an eating disorder, the kind of layered suffering that's exhausting to even describe, let alone carry while touring the world. And then this. January 15th, 2018. Dolores was in London. She was there because a band called Bad Wolves had covered Zombie, and she'd loved what they'd done. She had agreed to add her own vocals to their version. Her friend said she left a voicemail just after midnight, sounding genuinely excited, saying she was looking forward to getting into the studio that morning. She never made it to the session. She was found in her hotel room that same day. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning. She was 46 years old. The Bad Wolves version came out 4 days later as a tribute. It climbed the charts. Millions of people heard it. She never got to sing on it, and I keep coming back to this. Zombie is a song about children who die in violence they didn't create. Dolores spent her whole life quietly processing the same truth, while singing it to the world, while carrying it alone.
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
Number 8. Elliott Smith, 1998. The Academy Awards.
You'll be that you'll never see the
Elliott Smith walks onto the Dolby Theater stage in a white suit, squinting slightly under the lights, and plays Miss Misery, his nomination, his song, from the Good Will Hunting soundtrack. Celine Dion won for My Heart Will Go On that night.
Baby, stay up all night when the things you...
Which means exactly nothing in terms of which song mattered more to the people who actually needed it. Here's what I keep turning over about that image. A man standing in the most glamorous room in Hollywood, playing a song entirely about feeling hollow and disconnected, to an audience that barely knew his name.
Still, drink up, baby.
He looked like he'd been placed there by accident. And then he walked back into his real life. Elliott grew up in Texas, under the care of a stepfather he described as abusive. He eventually left to live with his father in Portland, Oregon, and Portland is where he found his voice. Intimate, finger-picked folk rock that was almost uncomfortably honest about darkness.
And I'll make you okay and drive them away.
Songs that felt less like performances and more like private documents. Things he shouldn't have been able to say out loud but somehow did. By 2003, things had become extremely difficult. Substance abuse, depression that wasn't lifting. He'd moved to Los Angeles. He was working on what would eventually become From a Basement on the Hill, recording so close to the edge that finishing the album fell to others after he was gone. October 21st, 2003. 2 stab wounds to the chest. His apartment in Los Angeles. The circumstances were officially ruled undetermined, not definitively suicide, just a question mark at the end of something that didn't finish the way it should have.
Keep you apart, deep in my heart.
He was 34 years old, and if you've ever sat with either/were alone in the dark, if those songs knew something about you that you hadn't told anyone, you already know how much of himself he put into every single one of them.
Images stuck in your head.
Number 7. Tom Petty. Here's something that wasn't public knowledge until after he was gone.
There's someone
Tom Petty completed his 40th anniversary tour in 2017, 53 shows across the United States, with a fractured hip. Read that again. A fractured hip, emphysema, knee problems. He found out about the hip just days before the tour was supposed to start, and he decided not to postpone, not to cancel. He told almost no one, not the fans, not the press, and by some accounts, not even everyone in his own band fully understood what was happening to him each night backstage. He was being carried to the stage, using a golf cart to move between areas, timing his pain medication so it would kick in the moment he stepped up to the microphone, and then he'd play 3 hours and give his audience everything. And on the day he died, his family told him his hip fracture had become a full break. His wife Dana and daughter Adria made the details public afterward. Specifically, they said, because they wanted the world to understand this was not recklessness. This was a man in serious, structural, real physical pain who made a decision to keep a promise to the people who came to see him. Here's my honest take. Whether that was the most selfless thing a musician can do, or the saddest, I've thought about it 100 times, and I keep landing somewhere different. And you probably have your own answer. I'd be curious to hear it. Number 6, Jeff Buckley. In 1994, Jeff Buckley released Grace, a debut album built around a version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah that over the following decade quietly became the version, the one most people are hearing in their head when someone says that song's name. The album barely moved on release. Critics noticed, fans were slowly finding it. The trajectory was pointing somewhere extraordinary. Jeff never got there. He was the son of Tim Buckley, a folk rock singer who died of a heroin overdose in 1975, when Jeff was 8 years old. Tim barely knew his son. They had met in person exactly once, and Jeff spent much of his life carrying the shadow of a father who was also, somehow, the reason music was in his blood. Complex grief, depression, the very specific weight of being the child of someone famous who never showed up.
Bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight.
Trying to build an identity that could stand on its own, separate from a ghost. By 1997, he was in Memphis. His second album was in progress. His band was due to arrive, and on May 29, 1997, while waiting, Jeff went swimming in Wolf River Harbor, a channel of the Mississippi.
To a kitchen chair. She broke your throat and she cut.
He was fully clothed. A passing boat's wake pulled him under. He was 30 years old. No drugs, no alcohol, just a man in a river on a warm evening, and an accident with no warning and no reason, which is almost harder to sit with than any other kind of ending. At least a reason gives you something to hold.
Hallelujah.
Grace has now sold millions of copies. His Hallelujah has been covered hundreds of times. Almost every version, consciously or not, is following his blueprint. He was working on an album called My Sweetheart the Drunk when he died. He never got to finish it. Number 5, Kurt Cobain, Nirvana. Here's what most biopics spend one paragraph on before moving forward. Kurt Cobain spent much of his adult life in serious physical pain, chronic stomach pain, undiagnosed, persistent, real. He wrote about it in his journals. He described it in interviews. Every endoscope showed inflammation. Doctors couldn't identify a clear cause. And at some point he discovered that heroin made it stop. Not the emotional noise, the actual physical pain. He described it himself. 3 days in a row using heroin, no stomach pain. That, he said, was such a relief. So when you trace his addiction, and people have spent 30 years doing it, you're not looking only at a rock star making destructive choices. You're looking at a sick man who found the one thing that gave him relief and then couldn't find his way back out. He was 23 when Smells Like Teen Spirit put Nirvana on every radio in the world. By 27, he was the designated voice of a generation he never asked to speak for, an identity he found suffocating. He checked into a rehab facility in Los Angeles in March of 1994. He left early. He flew home to Seattle, April 5, 1994. Kurt Cobain died at his home. Suicide. He was 27 years old. His daughter, Frances Bean, was 18 months old. Remember that date, April 5, 1994. It comes back before this list is over. And here's the thing I didn't know until I started digging deep into his journals. He wrote about the stomach pain making him want to end his life, before Smells Like Teen Spirit, before Nevermind, before any of it. He was already in that kind of pain before the world knew his name. He carried it all the way to the beginning, and through everything that followed. Number 4. Chris Cornell, Soundgarden audio slave. Most people don't know this chapter. When Chris Cornell was 12 years old, he started using drugs. By 13, it was daily. And at 14, a bad experience with PCP triggered what he later described as a full panic disorder. From age 14 to 16, Chris Cornell barely left his house. He said it in a Rolling Stone interview. 2 years of being essentially agoraphobic, no friends, almost no contact with the world outside his room. Not because he chose isolation, because he was in the grip of something his 14-year-old mind couldn't name or navigate. And he wasn't telling anyone the truth, because what 14-year-old tells his father he smoked PCP and hasn't been able to leave the house since? During the worst of his depression, he stopped eating, got down to 145 pounds. He's 6'3". He found music, formed Soundgarden in Seattle in 1984, and by 1994, Black Hole Sun was everywhere, one of the most unmistakable sounds in alternative rock. Mechaba's work, built around a voice that could genuinely do almost anything. The same kid who'd been locked in a room at 14 was selling out arenas before 30. But the depression never fully left, and the sobriety he'd fought hard for eventually fractured. May 18, 2017. After a Soundgarden show in Detroit, audience members who were there said he'd seemed off that night, distracted, disconnected. He was found in his hotel room shortly after. He died by suicide. He was 52 years old. His wife Vicky later maintained that medication he had been prescribed had affected his state in the hours before his death. The official coroner did not find the drugs contributed to the cause. We don't know exactly what happened inside that room. What we do know: a man who had been fighting the same internal battle since before he could vote, through decades of music and sobriety and relapse, ran out of road. If you've ever tried to explain what Soundgarden meant to someone who wasn't there, you know. Number 3, Layne Staley, Alice in Chains. By 1992, Alice in Chains had made some of the most unflinching music about addiction that rock had ever produced. Dirt, released that year, was essentially a real-time document of what heroin was doing to Layne Staley from the inside, track by track. The band performed their MTV Unplugged in April of 1996, and if you watched it, you already know what you saw. You saw a man running out of time. There was no pretending otherwise. That was effectively the last time most of the world saw him perform. His fiancée, Demry Parrott, died of a drug-related illness in October of 1996. And after that, Layne was gone. Not dead, just gone. He moved into his Seattle apartment and stopped coming out. Former bandmates and friends would sometimes leave money or food where he could find it. He was spending everything he had on heroin. His health was collapsing in ways that couldn't be reversed. And then here is the detail that stops most people cold when they hear it for the first time. Layne Staley's body wasn't found until April 19, 2002. The medical examiner determined he had been dead for approximately 2 weeks. His bank account had gone silent. His mother had requested a welfare check. The estimated date of his death, April 5, 2002, 8 years, to the day, after Kurt Cobain. He was 34 years old. He had been alone in that apartment for a very long time before anyone came through the door. There is something about the specific quiet of his final years, not just the addiction, but the image of someone who was once at the absolute center of a movement, slowly disappearing into a room almost no one could reach. that hits differently depending on where you are in your own life when you hear it. If you watched that Unplugged and felt something you still can't fully name, you know. Number 2, Freddie Mercury. Number 1, Chester Bennington. Linkin Park. He was 7 years old when someone hurt him. An older male friend.
To explain in due time. All I know, time is a valuable thing.
Chester spoke about it publicly in later years. The abuse continued until he was 13, and he told almost no one, for years, because he was afraid of what people would assume about him.
I tried so hard and got so far.
So he carried it into adolescence, into music, into albums that landed on tens of millions of teenagers who needed exactly that permission to name the pain without having to explain where it came from, crawling, numb, in the end.
In spite of the way you were mocking me, acting like I was part of your property. Remember?
Songs that did something you can't manufacture. They made people feel less alone. That's not craft, that's transmission of something real. Linkin Park sold over 100 million records. Chester Bennington was one of the most recognized voices of the 2000s. And the whole time, somewhere underneath all of it, was a 7-year-old kid who never fully got to heal. Now here's the part I still don't have the right words for. On May 26, 2017, Chester Bennington stood at Chris Cornell's memorial service and performed Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, in front of Chris's family, in front of the band, barely making it through, openly weeping. Less than 2 months later, on July 20th, 2017, Chester Bennington died by suicide at his home in Southern California. July 20 was Chris Cornell's birthday. I don't have a framework for that. I'm not sure anyone does.
Only one thing you should know.
He left behind 6 children. His last album with Linkin Park was released just 2 months before his death. It was called One More Light. One More Light. And I'll say this one thing quietly, because I think it's the most honest thing on this entire list. The child who learned to hide pain at 7 years old became an adult who sang that pain louder than almost anyone on the planet, and the world still couldn't reach him in time.
Oh, I've put my trust